This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on our website following the download of it once it's all finished. Additionally, all of the materials and documents that are referenced throughout this presentation, all related documents, they are currently posted on the SCSC website. So for the documents specifically related to the Comprehensive Performance Framework, go to our website, go to the Comprehensive Performance Framework page. For things specifically related to renewal criteria, go to the Renew a Charter Contract page. And so all of the documentation is there. If you're a school leader or board chair, if I sent you the email blast before, I'm going to follow up as well with an email with all the materials. So you should receive that. If you don't, of course, just go to the website. One other note, we did present these proposed updates yesterday at the SCSC board meeting. It was kind of a high-level review. Today, we're going to go a little bit more in depth to the proposed updates, but those slides from yesterday's presentation are, again, on the website if you want to take a look at those. So without further delay, let's go ahead and get started. If you are not familiar with the mission and vision of the SCSC, this is a good time to refresh your memory and become familiar with it. We always highlight the vision and mission of the agency because it really is the foundation of everything that we do, specifically when we talk about academic performance and then expectations for renewal. So I just want to highlight again that our mission is to authorize high quality charter schools that provide a better educational option to students than they would otherwise receive in their traditional district school. And how do we carry out this mission and vision? Well, we have a strategic plan, just like many other organizations. We have a strategic plan to help us fulfill this mission. And one of our strategic goals is to increase the number of academically superior state charter schools. And by doing this, highlighting superior schools, we want to really provide greater transparency to families and to communities, students, and stakeholders to make informed decisions about the school that they're choosing to opt into. So all of the edits that you'll hear from me today for the academic section and for the renewal criteria really hinge on this idea of making things clearer and more transparent for students, families, and stakeholders in the community at large to understand. There's some things that just really needed some cleaning up in our CPF and our renewal criteria, so it's not a great deviation from what we've done in the past. It's kind of just some cleanup measures that we're proposing here today. So here are our topics for today's discussion. Like I said, they're really focused on increasing clarity and transparency. As a reminder, for the 23-24 Comprehensive Performance Framework, we had some new changes. So you'll look for that in your next CPF that comes out. You may recall we've added an exceed standards category and we adjusted the approaches standards category. These changes were proposed and adopted last summer. And so the first time, of course, you'll be seeing those roll out will be in the next CPF report that you got. But I'll kind of briefly cover those as we talk about some of the newly proposed things for the academic section. So we're proposing adding a varied designation for the grade band measures. We're removing the district weighted comparison score and removing the grade band enrollment weighted or whole school score calculation. And I'll go into each of those. If you're listening to this and you have no clue what I'm talking about, one thing that this presentation does, it assumes that you are already familiar with the academic section of the Comprehensive Performance Framework. If you're listening throughout this webinar today and you just have more questions and you need to have a better baseline understanding of the academic CPF, I can send you some resources. Take a look at our website or feel free to just email me and we can have an individual discussion. But I did just want to note that. So one of the things that we are proposing is adding a varied designation, and this aligns with one of the things that we've done in the past, like I said, that you'll see in your 23-24 CPF, and adjusting the approaches standards. So this is kind of the progression of what we've seen with our approaches standards designation over the last couple years. The original is that box at the top. The charter school earned a score that is the same as, which is no more than 2 points below. That's kind of how we define same as, or higher than the comparison in at least one but all not but not all grade bands served. So that's that first box there at the top. The example here is if you are a K through 8 school, so you're serving across different grade bands. And as you know, with all of our academic indicators, they are generated with the CCRPI, they're generated at the grade band level, at elementary, middle, and high school grade band levels. So you get a different score for each grade band. So previously, you could have a varying designation across the grade bands that you serve and receive an approaches standards designation. So you could see how that could be very confusing if I was a parent looking to enroll my student in the school. They have an approaches standards designation for that one that is like the third over. Well, that's a very different type of performance than the first one. Say if I was in K through 5, the approaches standards, I could either be above or I could be below. It's not clear. So we took some steps last year and updated the approaches standards category to the charter school is no more than 2 points below. Again, the same as the comparison score in all grade bands served. So no more than 2 points below or above. So you can see how that kind of changed that to show that you couldn't have a below rating and still receive an approaches. So now we are proposing taking it just one step further to clarify it even more and add a varied designation. And so schools that have performance across grade bands that doesn't align with one another, that differs from one another, they would be given a varied designation. So that indicates to communities, to parents, and to the SCSC that we need to take a deeper look into the school's performance and see which grade bands are performing well, which grade band is performing behind, and look into it a little bit deeper. So here's how that edit would play out across our academic measures. So you can see here up at the top, we still have the same academic measures that you all are familiar with: CCRPI content mastery, CCRPI progress scores, CCRPI grade band scores. You see that's in italics, and I say, or whatever they're called. You all are probably aware that Godot will be back to calculating those scores for the 23-24 CCRPI data. I don't know if they're going to call it CCRPI grade band score or not, or what that looks like specifically, but there will be some sort of overall school score that weights all the different components of CCRPI and rolls it back up into one score again. So Godot will be doing that. So whatever that score is called, we'll be using that. You may recall that the SCSC did that calculation last year. We'll no longer be doing it internally, and we will go back to just using what Godot posts as we have in prior years prior to the pandemic. And then the SCSC value added impact score. So we'll still have all those same pieces of data. All of the expectations are still the same. You can see that exceed standards, that will be new. We didn't have that in the last CPF you got, but we'll have it in this one. As a reminder, exceeds is that the school outperforms the comparison score by 10 or more points on any one or combination of measures across all grade bands. So it can be a combination just like in the past, but you have to have it across all grade bands that you serve. And you'll see here the varied designation gets added. It will be, we plan on labeling it with orange because approaches is already yellow, does not meet is red. And then we have different shades of green for meets and exceeds. So here's how that adding the varied designation would slide into the academic measures. Not a big change here. Again, it's just kind of adding another label so we can provide greater transparency around grade band performance. So we've kind of already talked about the exceed standards. I just reminded you guys that's the addition of 10 or more points above. And then the approaches standards category, I reviewed with you guys what that looked like, that transition, and then adding the varied designation. So the next thing that I want to talk about is the proposal to remove the district weighted comparison score. And so, and then this is just another view of what that looks like, right? So here's our academic measures, what we're proposing, same measures before, to To meet that standard, a school is considered meeting if it outperforms, and before we would say the schools or the districts from which it enrolls students. And what we're proposing now is to take out that districts. So it's just the school measure, and then remove the outperforms the schools or districts on that grade band weighted enrollment, and we'll talk about that next. But first, the district weighted comparison score. So you all are probably familiar, the SCSC calculates comparison scores in two different ways. We have a district weighted comparison score and a school weighted comparison score. These are both generated using the student record address element for students. So we take the address, we do some geocoding, and we match it back to the school that the student would otherwise attend if they were not enrolled in the state charter school. So that local school that they're zoned to attend based off of their address. And then we roll all those up to percentages by the school. So we have the proportion of students in your school that are zoned to attend each of the other local district schools. And then we multiply that by the CCRPI, or the comparison scores, to get your comparison. So the district comparison score is just rolled up a level further, and it takes it just to the proportion of students from the districts that the students would otherwise go to. The district weighted comparison score is kind of a holdover from when we didn't have the school weighted comparison score. So for some of you who have been around since the beginning of the SCSC, you may recall at the very, very beginning, we did a simple average of comparison scores, and we knew that that was just not the best way to compare schools, to a simple average of their district. So we said we've got to find a better way. And so we used FTE system of residency report to create this district weighted comparison score. But then in 2018-19, the Georgia Department of Ed started collecting and reporting student level address, which allowed us to create the more precise, more granular comparison of the school weighted comparison score. So now that we have that data and we've had it for a few years and we know it's technically reliable and we're able to do this calculation, there's no longer a need for the district weighted comparison score. And you all are probably aware as well that your school weighted comparison score tends to be much lower than your district weighted comparison score. And that's because, you know, state charter schools often choose to go into communities where there's a need. So the surrounding area schools, or, you know, students are choosing to opt into your school from lower performing schools. So typically this school weighted comparison score is the score that our schools are meeting the standards on, and we no longer need the district weighted comparison score. So you can see that that's why in this slide here, we've just kind of removed the districts element. So otherwise, the measures still are the same. You'll still get those those school weighted comparison scores for each of those measures. That process isn't changing at all. Now, the next part that I am proposing is to remove the overall school score, or what we have often called the grade band enrollment weighted score. So you may recall this is a slide that we have shown in the past when we've talked about doing this calculation. We really implemented this calculation when the Georgia Department of Ed stopped calculating CCRPI score. So this is the same type of methodology that they use for CCRPI single score, and we employed it for our schools that served across grade bands. So you can see there, this is how it worked. You take the school's score for each grade band and you multiply that by the percent of enrollment in each of the grade bands, and you sum that up to get a whole school score. And then you do the same thing to the comparison score. And if that score outperformed, then it was meeting standards. So this is an example of the positive effect with that and what that can look like. However, there's also cases where it had a negative effect. So this is the unintended consequence of this calculation. So this is an example here where the grade band that the school was outperforming is actually only 29% of the student enrollment. And so that's not an accurate picture of the school's performance. This whole school score is masking the true performance of the school, and that 71% of the students in the school are actually not receiving a better educational option in any of the measures. So because this calculation obviously has some flaws, we are recommending to remove it. And now moving forward, a school that has this type of performance would be designated as varied, right? Just like we went over in the previous slides, if you're meeting in one and not meeting in the other, you now have a varied designation. So this is an example of what your CPF tables would look like in your CPF report. Moving forward with these updates. We'll have each of the same grade band measures. We'll provide your grade band designation for each and your overall designation. Varied would be in these cases, like we said, where you're outperforming in one. I'm sorry for that typo there. It says meets and approaches. Pay attention to the colors. It's where red and green. And then the new exceed standards is an option as well. So then how will this play into the review at renewal? Because I think that that's ultimately what you all are wondering about, is like, okay, so if I get this varied designation, what does it mean for me in terms of renewal? And so at renewal, schools with varied performance across grade bands will be reviewed in depth. The SCSC may consider whether the majority of students enrolled in the school are receiving a better educational option and how significant the achievement gaps in the grade bands are with low performance. So all it's saying here is there's now, if you're familiar with the renewal criteria, the previous renewal criteria, there were certain performance metrics, and if you met those performance metrics, you were almost kind of automatically guaranteed a renewal. What this is saying is that you may still very well be renewed, but there isn't, you're not just going to have this automatic guarantee of renewal. What we'll want to do is we'll want to take a deeper look. And so your application, your school visit, your renewal interview, and additional data, all the data about the school is really going to make a difference. Like we said, one of the things that our board does find compelling is that when a majority of students enrolled in the school are receiving that better educational option. So if you're that positive example that we used to have before, it's, you know, it's highly likely that that would be a positive thing moving into renewal. So here are the proposed academic measures for the 24-25 school year and how a school would be considered meeting standards. Again, if the school outperforms the schools from which it enrolls students on any one or combination of the measures above in all grade bands served. So again, the foundation of the academic section is not changing. We're just really kind of cleaning up some of the measures so that there's greater transparency and understanding about how the school is performing on each grade band level. If approved, these changes would go into effect for the 24-25 school year, so the school year that just started. But we would go ahead and calculate 2023-2024 school year CPF scores using both methods for informational purposes. So the old methods would still come into play. You would still see whole school score calculations, the district weighted comparison score. You'd still see all of that for your 23-24 school year scores. And then we would also calculate the 24-25, which is basically just removing some things, cleaning it up, and we would provide both of those to you for you to see how it'll play out and how it will look for the next school year. And before I move on to the renewal criteria, I will pause and just see if we have any questions in the chat or in the questions pane. And if not, feel free, of course, to just type them in there as you go. I'll have time at the end to address all of them too, so feel free to add them or of course, you can just send me an email at the conclusion of this webinar or at any point in time. I don't believe that I see any questions currently, so I will just keep moving. So the renewal criteria. Renewal determinations. As you all know, the comprehensive performance framework is the main driver behind renewal determinations. And in accordance with SCSC rule, the SCSC must review schools' results every 5 years and impose meaningful consequences. So even for schools that have been granted longer terms, there's still that 5-year in-depth review that we do for schools in accordance with our rule. And then if you have a abbreviated or a shorter charter term, then you're actually getting reviewed more than every 5 years. But that's the guidelines around our renewal process. And again, when we think about renewal, we also want to ensure that we are doing things in alignment with our strategic plan. Again, to increase the number of academically superior schools, we have to have high-performing schools in order to be renewed. One of our measures of success is that 100% of state charter schools not meeting renewal standards will be non-renewed. And if we're going to meet that measure of success, we have to ensure that the renewal standards align with our values and are written in a way that truly focus on the items that are important to the SCSC commissioners. So for this segment of the presentation, I have 3 different things to review with you all. First, I'm going to review renewal values established by the SCSC commissioners. I'm going to preview the new renewal criteria, and then I'm also going to preview the 24-25 renewal schedule. Again, all of this is posted on our website on the renewal page of the website, so you can go there and you can see all of it as well. So there are 6 different values. These are the first 3 that were established by commissioners. The first, you can see there again, directly relates back to the mission of the State Charter Schools Commission. So they all agreed that the purpose of a state charter school is to provide students with a better educational option. They also wanted to highlight that academics is the driving force behind renewal recommendations. So excellent fiscal and operational scores do not excuse poor academic performance, and excellent academic performance may override fiscal and organizational failures if those failures do not put the school at risk of imminent closure. You have to be able to, pay your teachers. That's a key thing as we move forward, is that academics is really going to hold a lot of weight. The 4th renewal value is that performance trends in more recent years carry more weight in my decision making. All commissioners agreed with that. We need to have a focus on what's happening at the school currently. That's the biggest concern. They also agreed that schools in their first charter term should be afforded more flexibility and consistently meeting standards to account for the difficulties of opening a new state charter school, and that renewal decisions should be based on historical data, not future promises of performance. So taking all of those values into consideration, we created some new renewal criteria. And the new renewal criteria highlight academics by keeping the high performance standards. So when you see our new renewal criteria, you'll notice that the level of expected performance for academics has not been decreased. We are still keeping that high level of academic performance expectation. But what we are doing is we're providing more flexibility in the financial and operational track record expectations. The new criteria are also emphasizing performance trends by requiring positive results in more recent years. We're clarifying that the use of a 2-year probationary term is for first-term schools only. So again, if you've been operating for 8, 10, 12 years, there shouldn't be a need for a 2-year probationary term, right? That is solely reserved to schools in their first charter term who may be working some things out. The criteria also note other items outside of the comprehensive performance framework that might be considered. Again, if you looked at our old renewal criteria, it only had CPF information, and that still is the main driver of renewal recommendations. But we also want to account for the fact that there are other things that may influence renewal recommendations, especially when there's questions around schools' CPF performance. So we bullet point some of those things that commissioners found compelling, so you have an idea of what other things may be considered. And it also underscores the fact that these are just guidelines and that the SCSC can make renewal recommendations or approve renewal terms outside of the listed criteria. It's always been that way. All of the criteria and standards that we have posted, they are just guidelines. The SCSC staff and commissioners have the prerogative to make other decisions. However, if you fall into the categories that align with the expectations, then you're probably in a good space at renewal. So this is a snapshot of the new SCSC renewal criteria document. And again, the two things that we just talked about to highlight, these are, again, guidelines around renewal decisions. And then you could see down there the box that highlights all the different things that may be considered. So that first bullet point up there is grade band, enrollment, and performance. That kind of goes directly back to that varied designation. If you don't fall into any of these easy categories, that is still something we're going to consider. Student enrollment trends, probation history, high-risk financial monitoring, all of these types of things. If we need further information about the school's performance, we're going to be considering these different elements. Again, this document is posted on our website, so I encourage you to go download it, take a look at it. But I will just go through and highlight some things that are different than before or a new structure. So the renewal guideline defines 4 potential outcomes for state charter schools coming to renewal for the first time and 3 potential outcomes for state charter schools who have received renewal in a prior cycle. So again, the 2-year probationary renewal terms are not available to schools in their second or subsequent charter term. However, the 5-year and 3-year are still available options to schools in any year. Here's some highlight of some changes that you'll see between the previous criteria and the new criteria. So as I mentioned before, the academic standard remains mostly unchanged. So previously it said meets for a majority of the charter term. Now it's going to be meets or exceeds because we've added that exceeds category for a majority of the charter term and in the most recent year. So that's a new addition. And again, that is just to signal to the school and to SCSC staff and commissioners, if there's a decline in the school's performance in the last year, that doesn't mean the school's not going to get renewed. That just means we may need to look a little bit deeper into the school's performance and see what's going on. But the biggest change you see really is related to the finance and operations section. So when you were a new school, you had to meet at least 50% of the time or in the last year. But if you were a tenured school, you had to meet a majority of the term. And that was a pretty high bar. And it didn't align with the values of academics being the main driver. Because if you're meeting that top criteria and you have strong academic performance, as long as your finances and operations aren't putting you at risk of closure and we see some stability and we see some good things happening there, we still want to renew you. So that new criteria is that you're either meeting or you're approaching at least 50% of the term, and again, in that most recent year, because we want to be sure that as you're coming to renewal, you're in a stable place. But it provides more flexibility in those spaces because we know that operating a state charter school can be hard. And here are a highlight of the changes for the 3-year renewal. So previously it was for a new school, you could just meet in the most recent year. And for a new or tenured school, it's that you perform no more than 3% below for a majority of the term. So what we've done is kind of just merge those together, and the new academic standard is that you perform no more than 2 points below a majority of the term and in the most recent year. So that applies to all grade bands that you serve. So as long as you are performing kind of on par with your comparison score a majority of the time and in that most recent year, you'll be eligible for a 3-year renewal. And again, this isn't a great variation from the academic space previously, but it's just cleaning it up a little bit with how it will function. And then again, providing more flexibility in the financial and operations section. So if you see there for a tenured school to earn a renewal of any kind, right, because it's the same from the 5-year as it is for the 3-year, you had to meet a majority of the term in finances and operations to be eligible for renewal at all. Excuse me. Well, we are changing that to meet or approaches at least 50% of the term in each of those sections. So again, just providing greater flexibility to schools to earn renewal in the finances and operations section. And then as I noted, we've added a criteria for a 2-year probationary term that applies to first-year schools only, that kind of takes into account the standard that we had before about meeting in that last year, meeting standards in the last year. So the 2-year probationary criteria for academics is that you perform no more than 2 points below the comparison score at least 50% of the time, or you meet or exceed in that most recent year. So again, if we see, you know, you've struggled all the first years, but in that last year in your first charter term, you finally get it right, we're going to give you a couple more years to see if that's sustainable. So let's take another look at the criteria as they're laid out in this table. And one thing I want to point out is that the table is meant to act more like a matrix, right? Because you won't necessarily have performance that aligns across all sections of the comprehensive performance framework within the given term year. So let's do an example, for instance. So say your school has a track record that lands it in these categories across each section of the comprehensive performance framework. You're meeting or exceeding the standards a majority of the term and in the most recent year in academics. You're meeting that operational standards, but you're struggling to meet those financial standards on a consistent basis. You have a mixed record there. It's, you know, there's some things that you need to work out. If this is what your track record looks like, then we're going to move down to the bottom. So that's highlighting again up at the top, saying that this is a matrix. We're going to move down to the bottom and see what's going on with these other factors. And if we take a look at your operating funds and your ability to appropriately manage funds, and those all look positive and things look like they're headed in the right direction, then it is highly likely that you would still earn that 5-year renewal. Because again, the academic piece is that main driver and everything else seems to be trending upward or is in a positive direction. On a different view, if your performance, say, falls more into this category, you're a first-year school, you've kind of struggled some in academics, maybe you're getting it right, you are struggling with finances, and you know, you've seen some successes in operations, but not super strong, we're still going to come down here and we'll take a look at what's going on. And in this example, if the school did not have sufficient operating funds, and maybe that's because over here their student enrollment trends are decreasing. So their student enrollment is decreasing, they don't have enough money, it's, you know, highly likely it would be hard for them to maintain finances throughout the year, which means they're not getting to higher quality teachers to be able to increase the academic performance. Well, you might actually be in, you know, a space of non-renewal. So they don't all line up exactly. There's different factors that you would consider for the matrix. But one thing that you can feel confident in is that if you are meeting in the boxes across the board, then you will be, you know, earning that standard 5-year renewal and you won't have anything to worry about. One other thing that is new moving forward is longer charter term considerations. The last renewal cycle was the first time that the SCSC awarded a charter term that was beyond just the initial 5 years. So on the right is how a longer charter term consideration works. So if a school meets that criteria that's there listed on the left, it's eligible to earn a 5-year charter renewal with an automatic additional 5-year extension, essentially functioning like a 10-year charter contract. In year 5 of the new contract, if the school's track record indicates well, in the current contract, I'm sorry, that's a typo. If in year 5 of the current contract, the school's track record indicates it's eligible for a standard 5-year renewal, the contract will be automatically extended by another 5 years. So essentially, the school can just bypass the renewal process. If in year 5, the school's track record indicates it's not on track, according to these new criteria and standards that we've just laid out, then the school will have to go through the renewal process. So it doesn't mean that they won't still earn another 5 years. It just means we need you to submit the application. We may want to interview. We want to see what's going on at the school. It's a pretty high bar to earn a longer than a 5-year renewal. We want to see that the school has been meeting SCSC standards in all sections for 10 years, for 10 consecutive years. We want to see that you have exceeded academic standards a majority of the current charter term. So you have solid academics, you have solid finances, you have solid operations, and you've not been placed on probation within the last 2 charter terms. So if you check all of those boxes, you might be in line for a longer charter term consideration. Okay. And with that, I want to review with you all the renewal schedule for the 24-25 renewal cycle. So starting in September through November, we will do renewal site visits. I'm highlighting this because we've always done renewal site visits, but we haven't had a formalized process written out for that. And so we have that moving forward. And if you take a look at the renewal guidance that is posted on our website, you will see some guidelines around a renewal site visit. They are nothing to be worried about. They are not a compliance visit. There is no evaluation rubric or criteria for a renewal site visit. It is simply an opportunity for commissioners and staff to come see your school and to sit down and talk about the renewal process and answer any questions that you have. So typically renewal site visits last an hour and a half to 2 hours. We start by taking a tour of the school. Commissioners love to be able to pop in and observe classrooms just for a few minutes, not disrupting things. And we'll take the tour of the school, and then we all sit down and, like I said, have a conversation about the school's track record of performance and where they are in terms of renewal. It's also an opportunity for the school to directly converse with commissioners and share any other things that they want commissioners and staff to know about the school. Positive things, things that you're working on, things that, you know, elaborating on things that maybe you weren't able to or not able to include in the application. So if you are in the 24-25 renewal cycle, you should have already received an email scheduling your renewal site visit day. That came from Crystal in our office. If you have conflicts with that day, please reach back out to Crystal so we can schedule a different day for you and your school. They are, you know, we're kind of restricted to the days that our commissioners are also available to attend. So we have some limitations there, but if your day is just, you have a direct conflict, then please let us know. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you on your renewal visit. We have otherwise, the timeline looks very similar to the renewal timeline in previous years. The renewal application will open at the beginning of November on November 4th. It will be due January 3rd. And we will schedule renewal interviews January 27th through 31st. We will have the commissioners vote on renewal recommendations at the February 26, 2025 SCSC meeting, and you'll get your recommendation letter 2 weeks prior to that meeting. A note about the applications. As you all know, we are heavily reliant on the release of data from the Georgia Department of Ed, from the release of CCRPI data. I have been hearing that the CCRPI data will be released late this year, even later than it was last year. We're going to make every effort. SCSC staff is going to make every effort to get the data, once the data is available, to get it, calculate those comparison scores, and get you guys your academic scores for the 23-24 school year, so you can go ahead and submit your application. If the deadline for the application rolls around before we've been able to get you your scores, just go ahead and submit the application as is, and we will follow up with your scores as soon as they become available. But we should have at least your financial and operational scores to you before the deadline, and we will we'll get you the academic scores as soon as possible. My hope is that we'll be able to get it turned around to you before the application is due. A reminder, the application is in the SCSC admin portal. So that's where you'll be able to access it. It's the same portal that you use to submit monitoring documentation. That's the portal that you will log in to submit your renewal application. The renewal application is very short. It's a streamlined process because, as I mentioned, the renewal determinations are highly based on the school's track record of performance. So there's not a lot that we're really looking for in your renewal application. But briefly, there's 3 different sections in the renewal application. The first asks just general information about your school and different components of the charter contract and elements that you may want to change upon renewal. So for instance, it's going to ask you if you want to change your mission or your essential and innovative features, or the grades that you serve, or if you want to increase your enrollment cap. All of those kind of general components about the school program that are in your charter contract. The first section of the application allows you to note any changes to those things that you would want to make upon renewal. The next section of the application just has you complete a table showing if you met academic standards, financial standards, and operational standards in the years of this current charter term. So of course we have that information, but we just want you to fill out that information so you can see what that looks like in alignment with the new criteria, so you can get an idea of where your school falls in terms of a renewal recommendation. And then finally, the last part of the renewal application is just an opened text space where you can provide additional information. I think that we might have a place where you can upload information if necessary, or you can email me any additional documentation. But it's just a text block where you can let us know anything else that you didn't let us know. Again, we have the renewal site visit so that you can tell us things in person, but if you want to provide written feedback beyond those other things, we have a section for that as well. And then one other note about renewal interviews. In certain cases, schools are exempt from participating in a renewal interview. Once you submit your renewal application and we have all the relevant data and we review it, we will reach out to you to let you know if you have the option to exempt your renewal interview. And that will be up to the school to decide whether they want to participate in a renewal interview at that point or not. Typically, renewal interview, schools that can be exempt from renewal interviews are those that have met the criteria to earn a standard 5-year renewal and aren't requesting significant changes to their educational model in their program. So if you are submitting a application and you're suggesting to change all elements within your charter contract, we might want to just pull you in for an interview so we can get a better idea about what's going on in the school, even though you've earned that 5-year renewal. But once you submit that application, we'll be reaching out to you to let you know if you are going to be required to schedule a renewal interview or whether you have the option to opt out of that renewal interview. So here's the timeline for all of these elements. Yesterday, as I mentioned, we shared these updates at the SCSC board meeting. Those slides are posted on our website. We are now sharing it today via this webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will also be posted to our website. From today until September 20th, all of these proposed updates are open to public comment. So feel free to send me any questions, comments, or concerns. If approved, the renewal criteria and timeline go into effect immediately. So if approved, if you're in the current renewal cycle, the renewal cycle that begins with your renewal site visit, these new renewal criteria and timeline are applicable to you. And then, as I mentioned before, the CPF updates go into effect for the 24-25 school year. So for the school year that you are currently in that just started, so not the next rollout of the CPF, which you'll see for the 23-24 school year. But as I previously mentioned, we will we'll calculate it both ways just to share with you for informational purposes. All of the resources are on either the Comprehensive Performance webpage or the SCSC Renewal webpage. So those are linked here in this presentation, or just go to our website and you can find those. And then again, as I mentioned, please send any feedback to me via email by September 20th. We want to ensure that we get feedback and we ensure that it's clear, and we make any updates to the proposed edits that may be needed before we come with a formal recommendation to commissioners. And with that, that is all that I have, and I will give it just a few more minutes to see if anybody has questions. If not, I thank you all so much for attending today and for participating and being involved in the state charter schools and ensuring that students are getting the best high quality education provided by all of you great state charter school leaders. I don't see any questions. I'll hang around for just a minute, but if you're done and you don't have any questions, again, thank you for your time. Have a great one. I actually do see the questions. So if you're still on and you had a question, I will be happy to respond. If not, if you've already left, you're not hearing this, but I will reach out to you via email and answer your question. Let's see. Share the PowerPoint, we can do that. Let me get the questions here. Sorry. Let's see. We appreciate a more granular approach to looking at active performance. However, does it make it more difficult for schools to predict the performance? Does SCSC have plans to make tools available to assist schools with understanding, tracking the performance that the SCSC is using? So what we have started sharing with schools in terms of tools is just our breakdown of the data in the more granular level. So if you take a look at the Excel spreadsheet that was shared with you all for the last 2 CPF cycles. It gives you all the individual schools that your school was compared to and the related academic performance of those schools. So moving forward, you can take that same Excel spreadsheet and use those percentages every year to get an idea of what the comparison score may look like for your school. I had a question that says, do the changes apply to district approved charters as well? No, it does not. This is only for state charter schools. Same thing with everything that I've shared today. This is only for state charter schools. So this does not apply if you're authorized by a local district. There was not a slide, Linda, I see that she's already left, but she was asking if there was a slide for about the renewal application. You're just still seeing the schedule. No, there isn't a slide on the application. That was just the renewal schedule. But if you go to the renewal guidance that is posted on our website, it provides more details about the renewal process and what to expect in the application and the process as a whole. Are you exempt if you are a district charter and have received a recommendation from your district? Again, this question came from Kelly Gunn, which I see has left, but none of this is related to district approved charter schools. Okay, Mr. Kason, if you are still on, you had a question about, can you go back over the automatic renewal slide? Sure. And I'm assuming that you're referring to the longer term consideration slide and how you can earn a 5-year with an automatic 5-year. Here's the criteria for that if you want to take a look at that. So you have to meet performance standards in all sections of the CPF for 10 years, exceed standards the majority of the term, and not be placed on probation. So those are the things that if you meet all of those criteria, you are eligible to receive a longer charter term than just the 5 years. I see there's a question, can the general public get a copy of the renewal application? So the renewal application is in our portal. So it's, you know, you log in and you complete a application within the portal. But what I can do is just create maybe like a PDF or Word version that has this questions in it. And I can get that on our website so that that's available to the public as well. So just check back on our website in a few days, and hopefully we should have that up there. And again, I apologize that I did not, I thought it would send me, I thought I would see questions pop up in the pane as they were going, and they didn't until I clicked into it. So I apologize. And that I did not see these questions as we were going along, but I appreciate those of you who have hung in here and allowed me to go back over them with you. If you had any friends on the webinar that put in a question and they already left and I didn't answer it, tell them to just shoot me an email and I'll get back to them. Okay, well, I will end the webinar here. Again, thank you all for attending and for your questions and your participation. Feel free to reach out to me via email if you have any other questions, comments, or concerns. Thank you.